So Jerry Herman and Brian Boyce are going to be late and may not be able to make the meeting until 8 or so. So Doug DeHart, could you just say here? Shaw Spady.
Here.
Richard Craven.
Present.
Bob Roth.
Present.
Okay. And I'm Pete Walter, staff. And with that, we can move right into the agenda. Can you make sure your red lights are all on your little things?
Okay, red lights are on.
Okay.
Okay. I'd like the call to order the meeting of October 9th, 2013 of the Natural Resource Committee, City of Oregon City. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes.
So the draft minutes for April 10th, 2013 and May 8th, 2013 are included in your packets here tonight. And if you've read those ahead of time, great. If you have any comments, I gave them a cursory look over to make sure that there weren't any spelling mistakes or anything like that. They looked pretty good to me, but if you have any comments about them, we can make changes and approve them with changes.
There has,
What's that?
now I was absent for those two meetings,
Okay.
so do we have a quorum do we need a quorum to?
We do need a quorum to approve the minutes, that's true, and we can probably postpone this. I didn't think of that. But if you were just absent, I don't know if that's a problem.
If the rest of us reviewed it and we're comfortable, would you be comfortable voting on them?
Well, yes, I would, because I actually watched
them.
watched it as it was occurring.
Okay.
So, and
Well,
did
I
look
think
at the
that's
minutes, so,
fine. Yeah.
But I mean, I'm not sure what the requirements are.
I'm not sure either,
So
to
I'll
be
follow,
perfectly
I'll follow
honest.
your lead, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think
So-
you're okay voting on these.
Well, we
I'll
can
check.
always vote on them,
And
and if
if
it's
and
not
if it
appropriate,
turns
we'll have
out
to vote
that
on
it
them
wasn't
again.
appropriate, we'll vote again. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
But I think we're probably right, aren't we? I mean,
yeah.
otherwise there would be many circumstances where you'd have to ask, do we have a quorum now of the people that
Were
at
discussed
the
an item
meeting,
previously? And
Right. Thanks.
organizations don't normally try to do that, I don't.
Yeah, I haven't heard of it before, so it's kind of a
Okay.
interesting wrinkle, but
Well, I move that we approve the minutes for April 10th and May 8th, 2013.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
right, seconded by Doug DeHart
Mhm.
and moved by Bob Roth. And so do we have a consensus on that? Looks like we
Yes.
do.
Yes, yes. Aye.
Aye.
All right. So the minutes are adopted. Thank you.
Okay, we are now at public comments on non-agenda items.
Read just the name, and you don't read their address, just read Oregon City.
Okay. So Jim Nasita is here. He would like to talk about the Heritage Code amendment.
It's an agenda item, it's not a non. Oh, sorry.
Oh, it's an agenda
Yeah.
item. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so no
Apologize.
public comment from Jim. Great. We'll move down to general business, and we're now at agenda item number 4, the Heritage Tree Code.
Okay, so in your packet for this, I've included a staff report which summarizes the items that we discussed at the work session on September 25th, when we reviewed final amendments to the Heritage Tree Code. And the revisions included the following items. We added the language which was suggested by Shaw in section 1208-040D1B, Roman numeral 3, as to read that if one of the criteria for approval, the site criteria, is if the proposed heritage tree or stand is located on private property or on public property owned by a jurisdiction other than the City of Oregon City, the property owner, or if a street tree, the abutting private property owner will consent to the designation and agrees to sign the protective covenant. So that is in the code. Second item was the removal of the definition 1704-1385 of ornamental tree from the city code. And after some discussion, we just decided that it wasn't a useful definition because we had other definitions for trees in the code that are used in a regulatory capacity. So we just removed that. And the third item was modification of definition 1704-1380 for native tree or stand to remove the specific species references that were in there previously, and also to remove the sentence that states that significant trees are typically suitable for retention next to streets and are not of a species that would likely create a public nuisance, hazard, or maintenance problem. So what remains is that a significant native trees are those that contribute to the landscape character of the area, period. And so there was quite a bit of discussion about this because of the importance of having a native tree definition, obviously. But with respect to having a native tree list to rely upon, it was felt that the other definitions were just confusing and also could potentially disqualify a particular tree. And then there are certain trees that were listed there that aren't actually native, so that was another reason. So, let's see, I think those were the items that were discussed and agreed to at the work session, and the committee moved to bring this forward to the regular meeting tonight for a recommendation for approval to the Planning Commission and City Commission.
I've got a question on let's see, recognition of heritage trees and stands,
Okay.
where the city may charge a fee. Now, I assume that's to a private property owner, or is that
Let
to the
me make
city also?
sure. Which page are you looking
Well,
at?
I'm looking at 6 of 8 of the
Yeah,
red line.
of the red line version?
Yeah.
Okay. So is this, let's see.
It's item 1 under F. Recognition of heritage trees and stands.
All right, all right. City may charge a fee to cover the costs of providing the plaque.
Yeah.
We haven't done that to date. We've actually covered the cost of the 2 last designations on the plaques for the owners, but potentially there are other cities that charge a nominal fee for that plaque. And for example, Clackamas County does all of their designations at one time, and they'll have 20 plaques, and they charge accordingly, depending on how many they need to provide for the property owner. So that gives the city the right to charge a plaque fee, but doesn't require it.
I guess my
Yeah.
question had to do with the public right-of-way.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Does the city charge itself somehow, or could they? Or I mean, what's that mean?
Well, I think it would depend on if it was the Parks Department that was responsible for maintaining that tree, we could probably take it out of Parks budget, and if it was Public Works, and we'd do it out of Public Works, we'd figure out a way to pay for it. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And then, there's usually a way to figure that out. Mm.
a comment there then. I mean,
Mhm.
how the city might internally charge various budgets for preparing the plaques, I guess I'm not bothered by however the city chooses to do that. But I am a little troubled by the idea of asking the private landowner to do this. I mean, don't we want private landowners to participate?
Yeah.
I mean, if the
Yeah.
city doesn't want to provide them plaques, I guess don't provide them plaques. But giving them a bill seems kind of counterproductive to getting private participation, doesn't it?
Well, in some respects, it might be cost prohibitive, but I think it really depends on the cost of the plaque itself. And
How do they run?
well, we got ours from Canby Trophy, and they ran $40 each. So.
That's just for the
Yeah.
plaque, though, not for planting it, so to speak.
Right,
You
it
know,
just comes with
installing
a
it?
couple of stakes, and you
Yeah,
screw it to the
whatever.
ground. And in the case of the Ainsworth House, they wanted to actually mount that plaque on a rock that is at the base of the tree and mount it differently and actually put something else there. So some of this will probably need to be worked out with the property owner. Yeah. Mm. And it does, it covers the cost of, doing the inscriptions and that sort of thing. Mm. But like most things that are fees, ultimately the city commission would adopt a fee on their fee schedule if they want to charge it. Not something that's arbitrary.
I guess what I'm trying to figure out is how it's to the property owner's advantage. I mean, if you go ahead, I mean, you go incur the cost of maintaining and doing the stuff for the tree, then you're going to be charged a fee for the plaque on top of it. It's
Okay.
kind of seems like a disincentive.
Okay. Well, if the committee thinks it should be struck, we can strike it.
And they can always add it at the planning commission or
Right.
city commission level. I think it would be good. I think we would feel better about that if
Okay.
we struck it.
Yeah. All right.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Seems to be
Unanimous.
Consensus.
Yeah, reached consensus.
So we will remove the sentence, that sentence in the last part of F1. Okay?
Great.
All right. Remove the fee. Okay, are there any other issues like that? Last minute. Yeah.
Jim?
Yep.
Mr. Nisita?
Yep.
Thank you. James Nasuta from Oregon City. I come here mostly with thank yous and one concern. This has been a very long process, and I want to thank you all for volunteering for no pay to get these issues raised and addressed, and staying late at night. And same to Pete, because there's probably better things one can do on a Wednesday night than be in a room like this and poring over technical language of an ordinance.
Au
but
contraire.
I think it's a good code, and I want to thank you all for, as a private citizen, who is concerned about these things, for entertaining the suggestions I've made over the past several months on this ordinance as well. Like I say, I think it's a good product, and I would encourage its adoption tonight. So, having said that, I do want to express a concern, and I wrote the city attorney my concerns about this also. I'm going to pass this out.
Thank you.
last meeting, I indicated to you all that I had made a Public Records Act regarding the Heritage Grove ordinance, and I got a partial response, not a full response, a partial response. However, in the response was this email that I have shared and expressed concern over. It goes to the edit that the Natural Resources Committee made back in March, I believe, to delete language from the code that would have prevented Heritage Grove applications from being considered on property that was subject to a pending or approved land use application. That was in March. Unfortunately, what concerns me is that what this email indicates is that there were still discussions amongst staff and the city attorney in July of this year, 4 months after that, about a continued interest in that kind of policy. And it's that I'm disappointed with that. At the hearing on the Heritage Grove application last week at City Commission, Mr. Conkle, the planning director, implied in no uncertain terms, to follow up on Chair Spady's comments a moment ago, that there will likely be an attempt by, in the Planning Commission hearings and in the City Commission hearings on the ordinance, to reinsert that kind of language. He raised specifically not only the Public Works site, which was mentioned in this email, but also the Cove and the Carnegie Library, where there are also significant trees, and there are also pending or soon to be pending land use applications. Yes, that's an issue, and it is going to come up again. But I think looking at the big picture of all of this, here's my biggest concern, and I think it's a City Commission issue more than anything else. When Mayor Neely was here, and he's expressed this concern on a number of occasions, he expressed the concern that the Heritage Grove is not the appropriate vehicle to address habitat considerations. And I think, that's an argument that one can make. My concern is that while the City Commission remanded this Heritage Grove ordinance to this commission for revisions, and leaders are expressing that the Heritage Grove is not the appropriate vehicle to address habitat considerations, there is no corresponding effort to actually strengthen our land use ordinances to address tree issues on sites like this one and the Cove, and any other land use approval process to address habitat considerations there. Our habitat codes are quite weak, frankly. And there might be an argument that this isn't the right vehicle. I disagree with that. But the fact is, we have this, and we don't have anything else. That will be an issue throughout the continued consideration of this ordinance. I hope at some point the city gets serious. If it wants to be considered Tree City USA, to finally have a tree protection ordinance in the land use process that's worthy of the name. Thank you.
I have a question, actually. In light of Mayor Neely's comments a couple times, I actually asked our chairman and Pete if they could possibly put something like that on the agenda for tonight. Didn't happen tonight, but I guess it's next time.
We haven't had a response from anybody
Right.
yet, so
Oh,
possibly. I put it on the tentative agenda. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
But go ahead and state what your intent is then. My intent was to find out just what are the natural resource protections afforded
Yeah.
under the various ordinances.
If this committee wanted to provide leadership in raising those issues and making a proposal for stronger natural resource protection ordinances, I think that would be a magnificent thing.
I think we need some more education or kind of orientation to get a comprehensive perspective before we can do that.
It seems to me we've already decided, maybe we haven't, maybe it was just my own wishful thinking, that we were going to begin reviewing different ordinances of the city that pertain to natural resources one by one, make recommendations and changes like we did with this one, and continue the process. We talked about it in relation to lighting, and so we certainly, I think, as a group, are really interested in doing that.
As I recall, we specifically discussed in the past protection of large mature trees and thought we would start exactly as you've been discussing here by reviewing the available city codes and then trying to understand what's in place already and if there are gaps or if it needs to be further addressed.
Yeah, I think the next meeting, tentatively, we could discuss Chapter 1749 and what it does and does not address in terms of protections of upland habitat, because mostly it's concentrating on the areas adjacent to streams. Then, just going through Chapter 1749 would take some time. So, and then the other chapters that we have are the tree protection character, chapter that just applies to development review. But in terms of a comprehensive tree protection ordinance for the city, like Lake Oswego has, that in the larger context, we can look at these ordinances one by one and decide that.
I also am assuming that when this ordinance reaches the Planning Commission and the City Commission, we individually and as a committee will be able to make comments and
Yes, and this version that you have before you is, the version that you recommended approval on.
right.
And will remain in the public record as a reference. So
So if, for
I don't-
example, that goes to the Planning Commission and the Planning Commission makes changes,
yeah,
will those changes be what goes to the City Commission, or will our original document be what goes to them?
that's a good question. I mean, if staff suggests changes, or if the changes come from the commission themselves, I think that's a discussion. I mean, clearly what we're discussing here is transparency. We're discussing, the difference between having a heritage grove ordinance and a land use ordinance and what that means. And, if they decide as a commission to let it stand as is, then, I think the benefit of having this code now is that, and having had that clause that Jim referred to put in and removed for that very reason, I think that's a discussion that you can have very clearly at the Planning Commission, City Commission level. Yeah.
I had a question for Jim. Is there another jurisdiction that has kind of the natural tree ordinance features that would be kind of a model that you think Oregon City could look at? Just out of curiosity.
I used to work, community member Roth, for a civil engineering firm. I was a senior planner for a firm called Westlake Consultants in Tigard, and I did, my bread and butter was the small infill subdivision of, say, anywhere from 6 to 30 lots. And so I would work in ordinances, I would work in jurisdictions all around the metro area to submit these subdivision applications, and would have to write the narratives on how our applications complied with that jurisdiction's land use code. They were thick books with copious attachments to them. I would say that on a continuum, Beaverton and Gresham and the city of Portland were extremely rigorous as how they addressed tree retention requirements and preservation. I would put Oregon City far towards the bottom on what what its requirements are for tree protections. Now, you can make an argument that, a really rigorous tree protection ordinance can go too far. And finding the balance is the important part of this. But, again, on that continuum, I think we're far, far too towards the not stringent side. So, and that maybe, doing a comparative analysis like that would be useful for, how you consider what you want to do here.
And I'd like to piggyback, because Audubon and Metro did some analysis of comparative tree codes a couple of years ago, and what they did and didn't do. And we still have some of their analysis that they did when they produced that report.
Great.
I have one additional question, I guess. On the email, I'm trying to put it in context with something, and I, just kind of seeing it. I don't know who the folks are here. Who are these?
I will. Oregon cities has a city attorney. Every city has a city attorney. Some jurisdictions actually have in-house city attorneys. So they might have 1, 2, or 7 city attorneys that are part of the city. Oregon City has, as far as I can remember, and I think as far as anybody can remember, had an outside retained city attorney, Edward Sullivan. And I think he's the longest serving city staff member. Actually, I think he goes to the 1980s. He now is with a law firm called Garvey, Schubert, and Bear. He's also my former law professor at Lewis and Clark. And the individuals in that email are 2 of his staff attorneys, Jennifer Greger and Kerry Richter. And the 4th city attorney from Garvey, Schubert, Bear is Bill Kabaisman, who you will often see at city commission meetings, and in fact was the city attorney at last Wednesday night's meeting. So those are our city attorneys. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion about the ordinance? Questions, comments?
Well, I think this has been a really rigorous process, and I'd like to thank you for sticking with it throughout. It certainly hasn't. I think we've really put our pinpoint on some of the issues. I don't think there are too many municipalities that actually have a heritage tree code like this. I think it's pretty clear and objective, which is nice. It's going to help us make good, strong recommendations in the future. And I think it can serve as a good tool for staff and the committee to use. And I think it'll provide a level of protection for heritage trees and stands that will help us in the future. Thanks. So.
I think there's been a lot of comments, excuse me, on this, a lot of changes and so forth, and I think Jim Maceda has provided some really excellent testimony and pointing out shortcomings and trying to strengthen the process here. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, and thanks, Pete, for hanging in there through all the changes.
Sure. Well, we have a running red line, so it's not going away.
Yeah.
It's just we'll put it in a different folder for the time being.
Well, I suppose I call for adoption of the ordinance as written with amendment
With
of
the
tonight.
amendment. Okay.
Are we, we're voting not to adopt it, but we're
You're
voting
voting to
to
recommend approval.
recommend approval?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay,
I'd rather adopt it, but
yeah.
they won't let me.
Yeah. With the deletion of the line with respect to charging a fee to cover the cost of the plaque.
Right.
So,
Right.
so
Heck, I'll second if nobody else will.
Okay.
Well, who moved?
I kind of moved.
Can our chairman do that, or?
Can a chairman move?
You got me again.
Okay, why don't somebody else move?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll move.
Second.
Moved by Bob Roth, second by Doug DeHart to recommend approval of the Heritage Tree Code OCMC 1208040 with the amendments that we've discussed. Bob? Should we take a vote or?
Let's
Yes.
take a
I
vote.
think you have a consensus, or?
No, let's do the vote.
Okay, on this one. Bob?
I approve. Yes.
Richard?
Yes.
Shaw?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Okay, the code is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Very good, thank you.
Maybe this is the time to bring up this consensus versus voting. I know a couple folks on our committee would like to see us vote, actually vote, rather than say, well, this is a consensus.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I can see where we should vote on certain things, but maybe on others it's just a consensus.
Sure.
But I'd like some feedback on that, I guess.
I think you have the authority to call a vote if you wish. And,
I think calling a vote just makes it cleaner.
mhm.
It takes a minute more.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
there's certain times, I think, like if we're just working, like when we got rid of entity and used presence or something like that, that didn't seem the kind of thing that necessarily have to vote on. But
Right.
like officially recommending forwarding these
Or
items
minutes.
seems to be the kind of thing you'd want to vote on.
And the minutes.
Yeah.
In the minutes. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm.
so noted.
So noted. Okay.
So, do we have any member reports? Any members reporting?
Not from me.
No.
Richard?
No.
This time.
Okay.
Okay.
Staff updates?
I have a few, and I printed a little bullet list of these for you, which is off the top of my head. Willamette Falls interactive event tomorrow. There's going to be a big meeting. We expect a big crowd at Museum of Oregon Territory from 6 to 8 p.m. We'll be reviewing some very early preliminary concepts for the site, and they're going to be asking for feedback on what those concepts, how those concepts meet with people's future vision for the redevelopment of the Blue Heron site. So if you can make that meeting, please do. They do ask that you, yeah?
Where's that the land purchase process at right now? It's kind of hard to keep track of it all the time.
Oh, I can't answer that. I would have to have you talk to Christina Robertson Gardner,
okay.
who's the project manager on this project. I don't have the current status of
Okay.
that. Yeah. I'm certainly, you can probably get an update on that tomorrow. Yeah. They ask that you walk if you can, or bike, or not drive, because the parking lot will probably be full, and there isn't a whole lot of on-street parking there, or carpool. So the commission did vote to designate Waterboard Park as a heritage tree grove on October 2nd, and they postponed the nomination on the Public Works site until the location of a Public Works facility is determined. The Fall Foliage Heritage Tour was a big success. I think we had approximately 30 people of all ages come, thanks to Shaw and thanks to Mayor Neely and Jerry and Brian. It was a busy day because we had competing events at Willamette Falls Festival, but the weather was really good. I was very impressed by all of your knowledge about the sites and the history along the route, and it was clearly a big hit with the folks that were on the bus. So I think it's something that we can do again successfully in the future. And we'd like to know if the NRC would like to arrange a tour of Blue Heron now that the site has been cleaned up. Fridays are an excellent day for us to get into the site. So if you would like to do that, let me know, and I'll pass it along to the project managers. Yeah.
What would we really see? I understand the site's been cleaned up, but what would we really see this time?
Mm-hmm.
You know, since we're not seeing toxic waste or something like that the
Right.
first time, what would we
Yeah.
actually see different this time that we wouldn't see on the previous tour?
Well, I think they've cleaned out the big what is it called, the condenser? No, the big round collector thing. So that's
Future
been-
hot tub or
Yeah.
skate park.
Yeah, and a lot of the stormwater stuff has been contained or is being filtered now. So that would be interesting to see. I think some of the green and the shoreline is a little more visible, but it may not have changed a lot, except for it's much easier to get around now, and there's not so many hazardous things sticking out that can poke you. I haven't been since we all went together the last time. So, yeah.
What percent of the buildings are coming down still need to come down? Do you have any sense?
That I can't answer. Sorry. Yeah, I don't know yet. Yeah, still kind of a discussion piece as far as the visioning goes. So as far as vacancies on the NRC, we currently have one vacancy, and we will have a second when Jerry's term expires at the end of 2013. And we fully expect and encourage Jerry to reapply. So we are looking for someone to fill that position that Eric Carr vacated. And in particular, we're going to be concentrating on trying to staff up our tree subcommittee in 2014 and actually have a second group of people that we can rely on in that regard. The Tree City USA reapplication process is underway, and the NRC is serving as our standing tree subcommittee and for the purposes of that application. So I have to compile all the data from the various departments and event information by late November, and then get the application submitted to the Oregon Department of Forestry by late December. So I'll be sharing that information with you as I compile it.
What happened to the first one?
Which one?
Well, if it's a reapplication, what happened to
Yeah.
the first one?
Oh, it was successful. Yeah, we applied and we got our first status as Tree City USA, and then you have to reapply every year.
Oh, every year?
Yeah. And then you can get growth awards depending on how well you're doing.
I see.
So, you have to have some measurable goals in terms of not only tree canopy, but staffing and very importantly, citizen involvement in the process. So,
On the next item?
So the next item I wanted to point out, because we discussed this and we don't want to lose steam, we want the NRC, and the NRC wants to remain very engaged with the the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee, the Planning Commission, and City Commission to discuss issues of mutual concern and interest. And as Doug Neely had reminded us, that the City Commission retreat in January is a good time to get our committee's concerns before the City Commission, since they'll be hammering out their goals and priorities for the upcoming year.
Would it be
Yeah.
possible right now to recommend that on the next agenda, we set aside time to make those recommendations, to talk about and recommend what we think we would like the City Commission to consider? Can we
Certainly,
do that?
yes.
And Pete, if you could also describe the process, because like we can make recommendations for city council, but how do those get forward and processed, or if they do, by staff before they go, to the city commissioners? I'm not sure we're clear about that.
Well, I think, the discussions we've had with David Frazier and Tony Conkle and John Lewis and all the managers of those departments, Public Works, Planning, and Parks, and Scott Archer as well, is that these recommendations from the committee should go to David Frazier so that he can take them before the city commissions.
I think my question is more, do they get modified anyway between the time they like leave us and before they get to the city commissioners?
I don't know, because I have, the only recommendation I've taken forward so far in this regard was with respect to the IPM, the Integrated Pest Management Plan, where we had a form that we
Yeah.
signed on. And that seemed to me to be a good way to do it, and it was sent up. Since then, we had the discussion about how to get these things before the city commission. So I think now is a clearer understanding from management as to what your role is with respect to the PrAC, Planning Commission, and City Commission, and I'd like to keep following through on that.
It seems like PrAC isn't really motivated to meet with. I mean, it seems like it's not a equal two-way street. I don't know what to do about
I
that.
get that impression as well. But I think we just need to make our work plan as early in the year as we can, and get it to dovetail timing-wise with the city commission goals and priorities as well. I think that's probably an important way to do it.
You know, one issue with that, it says staff wishes for the NRC to remain engaged. And I think that's what Bob was probably maybe referring to also. And I'm not sure we've ever been engaged.
We haven't even gone on first
You know,
date.
Yeah. And it's like, if we're sitting here,
I think Brian met with.
but we're not engaged. I mean, there's no, from my view, there's no way we're engaged. You know, and if we're sitting here making decisions on what should be recommended to the planning commission or city commission, it seems like one or the other or both should be updated from time to time to say, here's what we're doing, and to kind of get some feedback so that when we do recommend something and it gets to them, it's not a surprise, and we've incorporated, some of their thoughts if appropriate.
I agree.
So I don't know how to solve that problem.
Well, I have a suggestion.
Okay.
I think November is maybe going to be kind of a long meeting, but we're going to have to get our act together and do things within a certain time frame. But when we come up with what we want the city commission to consider, we have that's halfway into our planning. I mean, it's sort of like, this is what we want to do: review ordinances, blah blah blah. I think it would be really helpful if someone went to every PrAC meeting and gave a 3-minute report on what the Natural Resource Committee is doing, or what issues are before us, or that are before PrAC that we would like them to consider, so that we actually have an emissary, so to speak, who proactively goes to every meeting. It could be a different person every time to discuss. Could be 1 minute, this is what we're doing, this is how we did it, or this is what's on our agenda. Do you have any comments? So that we start a dialogue.
That's an excellent suggestion.
I think Jerry Herman actually suggested that a few weeks ago,
Good.
that he might be interested in doing that. Have you talked to
No, I
Jerry?
haven't. So he's the perfect person.
Yeah, I mean, really and truly. I think-
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
November, we just determine the format, and
We better get them to reapply too. Then.
we get a, I'm sure somebody who must have like a schedule of their meetings, so we know when to go. And I think Jerry'd be the perfect spokesperson to start us off and see how we're doing with that. It's a way to start the conversation.
I like the idea as an aside of rotating among us, so all of us have some exposure to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Group, and I presume we would encourage them to think about doing the same thing if they're willing
Exactly.
to.
That would be what we might present the first time we go. A schedule of our meetings and.
Yeah. So what happens with the NRC minutes and agendas is that they are sent out citywide to all groups, City Commission, Planning Commission, PrAC, and everything else, and to this press as well. So I'd like to see that interaction from PrAC as well. But I'll suggest it to Scott Archer again and see where that goes. Yeah. Jerry, I'm sure Jerry would do a wonderful job as a.
Well, we can
An
go whether we're
emissary.
invited or not.
Yeah, exactly. But it would be nice to be invited.
It would be nice to be
Yeah.
invited.
So good. Ongoing project is our NRC website, agency and project link site with information on what other agencies in Clackamas County provide and do. Hoping to get that finished up and launched by the end of the year. It's just it's more of a public service and an explanation type website, which says for everything from septic systems that are managed by WES to Great Oregon City Watershed Council, any other natural resource agencies that we do work with here in the city and outside the UGB as well. And so we need to start thinking about our work plan for 2013.
I'm a little bit confused
Yes.
because next meeting's November.
Mm-hmm.
By the time we get done improving the work plan, won't we be in 2014? I mean,
Mhm.
2014?
Right. So every January, we're supposed to adopt a work plan as a group. So
But basically, we'll be in 2014 by the time.
well, I'm not sure if all you.
Okay, what I'm reading this saying is a work plan for 2013, 2014.
Oh, okay.
And we're talking
Yeah.
about adopting a plan. And since it's October already,
Mhm.
and we discuss it at the next meeting,
Mhm.
by the time we get done approving and doing things, we'll basically be in the
Mhm.
year 2014.
All right. So yeah, I'll take the word 20. These are just me off the top of my head.
Sure.
Right before the meeting. So I can do that. Sign code updates proceeding. Laura Turway is the project manager on that. The South End concept plan, we just received the 75% draft from the consultants, and we're reviewing that with our community advisory team on October 15th with a view towards starting planning commission hearings in November and December, and hopefully adopting a plan in January at the city commission level. On street tree removals, I don't know if you've been watching the news a few weeks ago, but there was a kind of a spate of complaints for sidewalk repair that were caused by tree roots, and so we've seen a lot of code enforcement responses to complaints, which are always handled on a case-by-case basis and only in response to complaints. We have a lot of subdivisions that were approved through the 80s and 90s with 3-foot planting strips. We did not have a street tree list, and we're really, really starting to see an increase in these problems with buckling sidewalks. And as the abutting property owners are responsible for the sidewalk repair, and the liability is all of theirs, as well as the maintenance of any trees as well, we issue 2 permits. We issue a street tree removal and replacement permit, which requires that the tree be replaced or mitigated for through a tree fee, as well as a sidewalk repair permit, which is issued through Public Works. Our new street standards, which were adopted recently in August, now require a 5-foot planter strip. And we have, along with our new street tree choices, we think we have a much better policy with respect to street trees. But there is still a lot of because of the cost of sidewalk repair, there is a lot of public angst about the enforcement mechanism that we use to make sure that these properties remain in compliance. And there is not a lot of city money available to assist with the repairs. And the liability associated with the sidewalk repair is driving a lot of the decision making. So for the foreseeable future, People are coming in, they are getting their permits, they are making sure they comply either through replanting with a smaller tree or designating a larger tree in their yard as a public tree by choice, or paying the mitigation fee into a tree bank. The opportunity that we have with the tree bank is we need to decide as a city how we're going to expend that money in the future, because we can potentially leverage the money through a partnership with Friends of Trees and choose a neighborhood which would like to fill in some of the gaps in their tree canopy and do a fairly large-scale tree planting. I would like to suggest that as a project for 2014 with the City Commission's concurrence as well. Since we have already had interest from Friends of Trees to operate down here, but because of our long-range planning projects, we haven't been able to prioritize it. So that's something I'd like to put out on the table for your consideration and recommendation.
If somebody designates another tree in their yard as a public tree,
Yeah.
are staff really set up or anybody really kind of monitor that? You know, I can picture these kind of
Right.
scattered public trees around. I'm just
Yeah.
kind of curious, are there staff resources, time,
Well,
or
our-
how much of a priority
Our
is it?
mapping, well, there's two sides to it. There's a legal requirement, a covenant that's required to be recorded against the property that designates
Yeah.
the tree in that case as a public tree, and that's done voluntarily by the property owner and recorded. And then you can always track that geographically on
Okay.
a map, by map basis. But,
Well, I'm just thinking kind of like the maintenance of that public tree. You know, it's
yeah.
It
Well,
just
the
seems odd.
maintenance is still the property owner's.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
but like if it came down or something like that, would staff really know it?
Well, we might not, but we don't know if public trees in the right-of-way come down either until the property owner comes in or there's a emergency of some kind.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, usually it comes up because of neighbors just pointing it out. And then there's either the proactive way, which is where the owner comes in and says, I can see this problem starting to happen, I'd like to address it, or I'd like to, in those few cases where the property owner really wants to save the tree and wants to propose an alternative to sidewalk repair that must be, that we do try to encourage that, but it's seldom the case because the tree roots in some of these planter strips are so bound in by the confines that they're in. By the time you either saw cut one portion of the root out, it'll destabilize the overall structure of that tree when you're making the sidewalk repair. So that's a really tough call. I mean, I've talked to foresters in the city of Portland who said, they've been able to forestall the removal of a tree up to 5 to 8 years in some cases, but ultimately the tree may have to be removed. So that's a tough staff resource proposition as well. Yeah. My hope is that we just are keeping up with the replacement and keeping the trees that we are replacing healthy, so that we have the canopy that we can maintain. So that's kind of an update on where that's at. At the next meeting, if we have time, I would like to discuss a natural resource overlay district review type 2 with you. It is a property on Illyria Street that is proposing a new house, so it's a lot of record, and there's a water resource partly on this property down at the bottom of the hill. So they've turned in an application to delineate that resource, and they're wanting to put a house at the top of the ravine above where the resource is, and move that house as far away from the top of bank as they can so as not to impact the resource.
Where is that located?
It's at the corner of Pearl and Illyria on the downhill side of the street. So if you're
The Newell Creek Canyon
Newell
watershed
Creek,
area.
yeah, it goes down into there.
There was a problem with slippage there, I thought, at one time. That
It's all unstable slope overlay as well, so they're having to do concurrent application for geologic hazard review on that. And it's not, we haven't deemed the application complete yet.
Okay, I'm trying to, it's farther than 50 feet from the top of bank,
That's a different application.
He's talking about this type.
Oh,
two
this
as
one up
well.
here. Oh,
That's
excuse
the
me.
one I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
so-
but
yeah.
There's
I got
three
it.
different.
Okay.
So the other two that I've noted on here were
Didn't do that.
what we call type 1 exemptions, where the site inspection and mapping clearly indicates that the project area is beyond the prescribed vegetative buffer. And so a couple of these that are exemptions I've listed here. One is 1802 4th Street. A gentleman made an addition to a garage. I think he expanded the garage. The existing garage was about 200 square feet, and he expanded it to the maximum allowed in the code, which is 600 square feet, but it was still farther than 50 feet from the top of bank. So we did a type 1 exemption there. And then on 19799 Leland Road is a subdivision that was previously approved in 2008, but the subdivision approval expired prior to the final plat, so we required they reapply and applied for type 1 exemption it's at Central Point Road and Leland Road, and I think that's correct, yeah.
What will you ask us to actually do when you present? I'm just
In this case, we're really just informing you about some of our natural resource overlay district reviews.
Oh, okay.
The type 2, I think it's partly in line with familiarizing you with the natural resource overlay district code
But you're not
and
asking
showing
for-
how it's enforced at a type 2 land
Okay.
use review level. Because your bylaws do say that you can comment on applications that have the potential to affect natural resources.
Thanks.
That's why.
And then who determines exemptions?
The exemptions are based on clear and objective criteria in the code, where you actually look at the site and then you look at the map as well. But those are both type 1 and type 2 are what they call. Type 1 is a not considered a land use decision. It's an administrative decision. Type 2 requires public notice and comment. Yeah. They're both staff level. And those are the file numbers associated with these.
Great.
Mhm. So that's all I have.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
This is really a nice
Yeah,
synopsis.
I know.
Looks like we've been doing something.
I
I
know.
would like to ask one question about item 2 on the first page.
Bullet 2
Not
there? Yeah.
2, but bullet 2, excuse me.
Yeah.
Postpone nomination on the Public Works site
Okay.
until the location of the Public Works facility is determined.
Mhm.
Does that nomination, well, let's see.
I have to admit that I just listened to the last 4 minutes of the city commission meeting and I saw the motion. So this is, I didn't get all the background prior to it.
What's your
Yeah.
question?
Yeah.
The question is there still an application? In other words,
They
you
denied
need
the
you
application.
need an application to nominate something, I guess. So
Mhm.
is the application
I
done
think it's,
now?
sti-
and they
it's
have to
still
resubmit, or
there,
what?
but do you know?
Well, I was at the meeting.
You
and
were at the
basically, they
meeting.
voted to approve the Waterboard Park nomination.
Right.
And they voted 4-1 not to approve the other one, indicating that they would look at it or deal with it later. And there was nothing specific attached to that, so Jim has something specific to say there.
Well, I had the impression that, that if it comes up again, in terms of a public works site, then there would be further consideration given to the trees.
Jim, would you like to
And-
comment?
I have a comment on that decision from Wednesday night, and I find it very problematic for this reason. First of all, there's no time certain on when there will ever be a decision on the new public works site. Could be 3 weeks, it could be 15 years. So, with that kind of uncertainty, here's the problem I see. The spirit of the motion was that when that uncertainty was over, either if it was decided to be at Public Works, they would consider the Heritage Grove applications during the hearings on the Public Works new application for land use. And that if it went somewhere else, well, then there's not really a conflict, and they would consider it again when it decided to go somewhere else. But if that decision lasts for 7 years, you have a problem, and there's a further uncertainty also in the effort by the planning director, Mr. Conkle, to want to try to reinsert the language that you all removed, which is what's going to happen if it takes 3 years or 5 years to make that decision on Public Works, and then the planning director convinces the city commission to reinsert the language that you removed. It kind of like obviates the possibility that was discussed on Wednesday night. So that issue will be raised in further hearings.
I think it's an opportunity for further comment.
But the nomination itself is gone. Is that correct? Because of the decision?
I think it's just, I don't know. Perpetually pending. It's postponed is what I heard.
Yeah. And maybe,
I mean, that's the word I heard.
right, postponed would
Okay.
I forgot to mention one thing during the member reports.
oh, we're sorry.
It's really important.
Oh, no, sorry.
I can be fast about this. It's outside Oregon City's city limits, but Multnomah County Health Department came out with a report today talking about potential future impacts on public health from climate change. And they're talking about things of warmer summers, wetter winters, more potential for mosquito-carrying diseases to be present in the area, like West Nile virus is already here, but additional ones. And it's actually a pretty interesting report because they're just, a lot of times we think about what happens to the fish or what happens to the tree, but there's definitely human potential impacts from climate change.
Thank you.
Good, sure. Thanks. So, next scheduled meeting date is November 13th. Maureen Cole has requested some FaceTime with all the boards and committees for input on the library concept. And she's particularly interested in your points of view for the Carnegie Park site because of trees and those sorts of things. She is available on November 13th to give us a presentation. So if that sounds good to you, I'll just confirm with her. And then also we would do an overview of the Natural Resource Overlay District Code. And in addition to the other items that we discussed, our prioritization of goals. So, thanks.
Comments to the city commission
Any
for their work
comments?
session in January.
Yeah, in preparation of comments.
Preparation
for the
of
city.
comments, yes.
Yeah.
What will be our next step in trying to share information more effectively with the PRAC? Is there something that needs to happen between now and the next meeting?
Yes. Need to notify Scott Archer that this is a priority for the NRC as soon as possible,
Okay,
and copy David Frazier
okay,
on the email that is sent to Scott so that we can get some feedback as quickly as we can. Yeah.
When
Mm.
is their next meeting, do you know?
Let me check real quick. Um, I'm gonna look at the city calendar. I think they have a meeting in November for sure, but they don't typically meet in December, so let's look here.
About October.
Maybe. Mm. I'll just go to the boards and commissions. Mm. Well, that's annoying. I don't see it offhand. I will. First available meeting, we should probably ask for that.
Right.
Okay. Oh, here we go. It is on the 24th of October.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I think it might be appropriate for our emissary, if they're invited, to talk about the heritage tree ordinance we've just passed, and that we're moving to the planning commission and the city commission for approval, just so that we can talk about that a little bit. And if there's any questions from PrAC, then answer those questions regarding the ordinance. Seems like a
Good
totally
timing.
logical, good timing thing to do.
Okay. All right.
Great.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, is that it?
Are we adjourned?
We are going to be, if that's it. Any further business? Pete, are you?
No, I have nothing more. Thank
Okay.
you.
Then the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Yeah.